Hi, we're here with Professor Darnell Hunt, director of the Ralph J. Bunche Center for African American Studies at UCLA. Dr. Hunt has his 2014 Hollywood Diversity Report. Dr. Hunt, your findings.
Well, I think the major finding is that there's a major disconnect between what's happening in the Hollywood industry and what the society looks like in America.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, we have a disconnect in terms of the representation of people of color and women in staffing positions in Hollywood, behind the camera as well as in front of the camera in terms of lead roles. And we also have a disconnect between Hollywood's professed interest in profits and the bottom line, and our finding that indeed shows that are more diverse actually do better in terms of their ratings, and movies that tend to be more diverse, or at least that get close to reflecting America's diversity, do better in terms of box office and return on investment.
Why is there a disconnect at all?
Because the industry is so high stakes, because people are trying to keep their job, they're trying to, if it's a TV show, keep the show on the air, if it's a movie, trying to get funding for the film, they tend to surround themselves with people with whom they feel comfortable, because they need to be able to depend upon the team and know that the project's going to get made, it's going to get made on time and high quality. What that tends to result in, if you're starting with a lot of white males, is they tend to surround themselves with other white males for the most part, which becomes kind of a vicious cycle for people of color and for women who have a hard time breaking in and proving their worth.
If you had to pick one place to start, where would you start? Would you start in the studios? Would you start at the agencies? Would you start someplace else?
Well, there's no magic bullet here. This is a pretty intractable problem that we've been talking about for decades. This is not a new phenomenon, and it's not like the first time we've talked about this. What's new about our report is that we document quite comprehensively, all these different arenas within the industry and exactly what's wrong and where the disconnects are. I think that it really does require a multi-frontal assault in terms of, these different areas that have been lagging. All of them need to be dealt with simultaneously. Everyone needs to pull their weight. You can't put it all on the studios, can't put it all on the talent agencies, and you can't put it all on the networks. I think they all play a role in the underrepresentation that we see.
Other people do reports, studios do reports,
Sure.
NAACP does its report. There are scores of reports on diversity exposure in the industry. Why is this report unique? Why do you feel like it's possibly superior or different at least?
Yeah, most of the other industry reports that are out there that look at diversity, I've seen, I know them intimately. In some cases, I've actually worked on them. The problem is that up until now, what we've had is kind of a hodgepodge of data coming from different sources that maybe looked at one arena or two. In our report, we look at a range of different arenas within the industry. We look at actors, we look at writers, we look at directors, we look at talent agencies, we look at film, we look at television. We look, for the year that we studied 2011 for theatrical films. We looked at the top 200 box office films. We wanted to see what the diversity was for those films.
And television as well?
In television, we looked at 1,061 shows. So we literally looked at everything on TV, everything.
Let's talk about the representation of women in Hollywood, both in front and behind the camera.
But I think the good news was that in broadcast television, women had reached proportionate representation. And that was, I think, a relatively new finding. I hadn't seen that before. And of course, one of the things that this study is bringing to the table as well is that we plan to do this every year. So, year 2 and beyond, we'll have longitudinal data so we can actually talk about trends.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So the brief in future years and your studies will go where? It will continue to do longitudinal studies on the exposure of different groups in the industry, but content as well. What other areas, and can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, the basic study that you have today is the core that we will do year in, year out. That won't change because we need to have continuity so that we can measure any changes over time. In addition to that, there are a number of spotlight issues that we intend to cover from year to year.
Professor Darnell Hunt, director of the Ralph J. Bunche Center for African American Studies at UCLA, thank you for your time. Good luck on your report.
Thank you.